Katerina, welcome to the show. Welcome,
Thank you.
yeah, calling in from New Zealand. Literally the other side of the world. We are 12 hours apart. Your sun is setting, my sun is getting up. And I'm very much looking forward to hear from you about Indigenous facilitation and the Maori understanding and way of facilitation, and to dive deep
Mm,
into that. And I always open with the same question. When did you self I always start with the same question. When did you start calling yourself a facilitator? And actually, do you?
yeah, good question. Well, e te tuatahi, neira aku mihi kia koe e hoa, moto karanga kia hau ki te tautoko i tō kaupapa. Ko waia hau, ko hekurangi te maunga, ko waia pū te awa, ko te awera te marae, ko Ngāti Parae te iwi, no te tai rāwhiti a hau ki Aotearoa, ko Katerina Kupenga tuku ingoa, no reira tēnā koe. Um, Yeah, my name's Katerina. Uh, I introduced myself in a traditional Māori greeting. So starting off with my mountain, which is Hikurangi, and it's the first in the world to greet the sun each day. My river is Waiapu, and it provides sustenance to the land of Ngāti Porou, which is situated on the east coast of Aotearoa, New Zealand. Um, and my name is Katerina. I'm a Māori facilitator. I specialize in strategic planning. And yeah, I'm just both nervous, I think, and humbled to be invited onto this podcast, especially being such a small island at the bottom of the world. We often feel like we're the small fish in a big pond. So to have this opportunity is, yeah, really humbling. So thank you.
Thank
Which leads me to your question around when I first started calling myself a facilitator, which is interesting because I think for me, the first thing that I think about is when I first learned the concept of facilitation. And it was so powerful. This moment happened 20 years ago. I can actually remember it vividly. And at the time, I was around 20 years old. I had just started working for the bank, which was a big corporate, organization, and I was really excited. And I had just been promoted to a personal banker, so I was responsible for lending. And we had sales training, which is quite common in the bank. And we get taught these frameworks and models to implement on our calls, and that's what we were used to. But this workshop for me was different. And when I say different, as soon as you walked into the room, there were flip chart papers all over the wall with flip chart art. It was bright. The tables were perfectly laid out. It was colourful. There were post-it notes. We were greeted by the facilitator, and I guess you could just instantly tell that she automatically put a lot of work and
you.
thought into preparing for the workshop, which instantly made you feel comfortable. And one thing that I remember about this facilitator, and I haven't been able to find it since, was she had this suitcase full of flip chart pens, like no joke. Like this big suitcase, and I'm a stationery queen. Like I just love stationery, so I remember that vividly. And anyway, we started the training, and it, it was different to what I experienced before because she took us through activities to help us uncover our personal purpose. So, what is our why? What gets us out of bed each morning? What are our values? What are the behaviors that drive everything that we do? So, it was a lot of deep internal work. And then once we kind of had a good foundation or understanding of our why, she then took us through an activity to take us back to the time that we applied for the role at the bank, and what was it that caught our attention, and why was it that we wanted to work, and how was it aligning to our purpose. and which was such a really cool exercise. And then once we understood our why, and the reasons why we joined, the bank and how that aligns with our purpose, then she talked about, okay, so um, what is it that you're struggling with when you're dealing with customers, and what strategies could you use to overcome the challenges that you face?
Mm.
And so for us in New Zealand, sales, we are quite passive people. So we're not in your face. We find it really awkward to sell. The word sell just like gets us, you know, yeah, it just doesn't align
Okay.
with us. But when I realized that my passion was connecting with people and forming relationships, and the reason why I joined the bank was so I could help customers with their banking.
Mm.
Those were the two reasons that drove me, that got me out of bed each morning. So all I really needed to do was to form great relationships with the customers. And then once I had that connection, I could support them with their banking needs. And that was my strategy moving forward. And I remember being so excited. The next day, I was like, I'm going to give this a go. I like literally in the matter of a couple of months became the top 5% bankers in the entire country from that experience. And I I literally thought that that lady was a magician. And I was like, I want to be her when I grow up.
I love that so much. Yeah.
Yeah. And I just noticed that ever since then, every facilitator that we came across, I would find myself just watching how they would interact with the group, the activities that they would do. I would just be in such awe. Um, Never thought I could ever do that role, and always super impressed how they can have a room full of leaders, with big egos, and they could bring us together towards a consensus. Like that to me was magic. So I was like, that's when my passion for facilitation started. And like after a 10-year career with ANZ, I ended up leaving, and I ended up finally becoming a facilitator, and I facilitated strategy in schools across Aotearoa, New Zealand. Really, really loved that job. But what I noticed was I wasn't a good facilitator.
Mm.
And we had the content and the programs prescribed for us. So we were
Mm.
delivering the content and the programs. And I remember like always trying to embody the facilitators that I had admired and experienced through the bank
Yeah.
whilst delivering content, like Simon Sinek activities or Brene Brown or radical candor. I can't even
Mm.
tell you what that means because it's not a New Zealand concept.
Yeah.
But I would be delivering content that wasn't familiar to me whilst also trying to embody
Someone you
facilitators.
weren't.
Yeah. And you put those two together, mixed with group dynamics.
Yeah.
And I wasn't even equipped to deal with people that weren't sticking to the questions and the
Mm.
timeframes and the agenda. And so when if there was ever a challenge or their conflict arose, I wasn't equipped with the skills to deal with
Mm.
that because I was literally trying to deliver
Yeah,
a
the content that wasn't
program.
yours.
Yeah, and make it fun and try and be like this. Like I just had this image of that woman in my mind,
Yeah.
that first facilitator who was just warm and bubbly. And I'm like trying to do all these activities and, like never, I was like, oh, maybe I'm just not cut out to be a facilitator. But I really love it and I know it can make a difference. So I need to upskill myself. So I searched training, what was available. And then I found the technology of participation training in Aotearoa. And what caught my attention to that was it had Māori facilitation perspectives interweaved into the training.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I was like, oh, well, this is interesting. Like, I've never seen a Māori course on facilitation before, and this has it, and the technology of participation methods are used worldwide. So, yeah, I'll sign up for it. It was a 3-day, 2-night course, um, which was cool. So, yeah, I arrived. There were about 12 other participants who also signed up for the program. And when we arrived, we have something that's called a pōhiri in New Zealand, and that's an official Māori welcome.
Mm-hmm.
And there are certain steps to this official Māori welcome that we do. It's so ingrained. It's just part of what we do. You know, we don't even give it a second thought. So we show up to the training. We go through what is called a karanga,
Mm-hmm.
and that is a chant that is led by the female. So a female from the hosting side sends out a chant, one female from the guests. They respond with a chant, and then we slowly walk in. And the purpose of that chant is to open up the vibrations, are set to open up the spiritual world.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a way that we can all bring our full selves to the space, including our ancestors and everything that we bring.
Oh, wow. Mm-hmm.
So that's the first step. And then we come into the room, we all take a seat, and then the males from a male from each group will get up and speak. And there's a certain structure to that speech. Generally, it starts with a proverb acknowledging the ancestors that are past, acknowledging the purpose of the event and what's bringing us together, drawing ancestral links to each other as well, and then welcoming each other to the space. And then the male from the guest sides will get up and he will respond to that speech and follow a similar structure. And then each group from each side will support that talk with a song.
Beautiful.
And so that's the structure. And then once the formalities are over, the guests will give the host a gift, and we place that down, and then we all exchange what is called modi, and that's a breath of life. And we press our noses together. And so when we press our noses together, we're inhaling each other's modi energy, breath of life. And then we have, we call that space sacred.
Mm-hmm.
And then we break that sacredness with food and drink. And then we start the kaupapa, the workshop.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. And I let you I let you finish or continue the story of your training, but just want to take a moment to reflect on that, because I remember that in our exploration call you said that you realized how much of facilitation spirit is ingrained in the Maori culture. And now when I hear you speak about this greeting and inviting people and their ancestors into the room around the shared purpose, that's at the heart of facilitation. But we, in air quotes, often forget. Why are we actually coming together? And and what I also hear is the slowing down to then speed up. So to create shared space around purpose, having everyone in there sharing food, which is very intimate and creates trust. And touching noses is very intimate. So for me, from a Western culture, it's something very intimate because your faces are literally coming very close together. And I wonder, is it even, and maybe that's something that we can touch later on, even possible, or what does it do to the group may be having to navigate through conflictual conversations. Because I can imagine that after having engaged in such a intimate ritual, you air quotes fight or you discuss on a very different level.
Yeah, I can talk about this for weeks, but basically, what you've just described is essentially what the purpose of the pohiri, the formal welcome, was designed for hundreds of centuries ago. And firstly, before I briefly touch on what that is, the pohiri ceremony is facilitated by one of our Māori gods who is called Tūmatauenga, and he's known as the god of war, but he's also the god of strategy.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's facilitating the pohiri process. So when the males are getting up to speak, all of the challenges and differences are brought to the fore in that space. It's almost like a debate.
Mm-hmm.
And so in a traditional setting, this will happen to and fro until the Greek group reach consensus based on the purpose of the event.
Wow. So they exchanged the challenges. And this is as a debate, or is it the hearing each other out?
Both.
Okay. So you
And
basically make everything that could be implicit, you make it explicit before even starting anything.
yep. And that will happen until the groups have reached consensus that they are all here to talk about the topic at hand. And if they're not, then they will agree to part ways
Mm.
and we will eat and we will laugh and we will leave. And so it can get quite emotional at this point, especially if the topics are challenging. And that's when we express ourselves through haka and waiata and song. And there's all these facilitative techniques that are happening within this space,
Mm-hmm.
all facilitated by and guarded under the watch of Tūmatauenga, our god of strategy, in a sacred setting. And this will happen to and fro until we reach that consensus before we actually start the workshop.
And if I understand correctly, so the consensus is not about resolving the challenges, but consensus about the purpose of, so
The
what is the
meeting.
nature of the challenges, so
Mm-hmm.
that we know what we really talk about. So
Mm-hmm.
basically looking in the same direction. Because
Yeah.
very often we say, oh, you did this and you did that. So we're not talking about the same thing.
Yeah.
Mm.
Like the purpose of the meeting could be we need to join forces together as two neighboring tribes. That
Mhm.
could be the topic. And then a debate could erupt, and it could be generational stories that are shared and challenges that they'll face together and where they not are not seeing eye to eye.
Mm.
These conversations come up until they reach a point where are we actually ready to talk? Are we actually ready to come together and talk and unite and talk about how we can do that, or is this not the time?
Yeah.
And the men will be having these conversations, and the women support the conversations with songs and waiata, and it could be just a way to reflect the conversation. Could be also a way to stop a conversation from happening. All sorts of dynamics happen. This is in a traditional setting because the pohiri process was actually established to identify whether the neighbouring tribes were coming in peace or in war. And also to talk about the challenges at hand. It's also for funerals and any gathering that we have this. That's why this process was put in place. And so it's so normal and so ingrained here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. Like it's just okay. We're going to a workshop. If it's a Māori event, there will be a pohiri, and so we go for. And if it's just a training, a facilitation training, there's only one or two speakers on each side. So it's really, not as intense as that what could happen at a traditional Māori setting. But yeah, that's what happened at this technology of participation training. And so we had morning tea, we came back in the room, and then what the facilitators did, or the trainers did, was they broke down the process of the pōhiri. So the chants and the kore and the talking to and fro and the exchange of breath and etc. And then we wrote down what are the specific things that happen at each stage. So we were able to identify the specific things, like the host woman chants, and then the guests respond, and we were recording all of these things. And then we looked at, okay, so how do you feel as you transition through each of these stages? And then so we got to share how we felt. And then we said, so and then they asked, what do you think is being facilitated at each of these stages? And it's like, oh, wow. And then they asked the question, so how would you describe, what does facilitation from a Māori lens mean to you now that we've been through this? And honestly, I feel really dumb saying it now, but I was like, oh my gosh, are you meaning to tell me that the pōhiri process is a facilitative process that has been intentionally and specifically designed to bring together diverse perspectives towards a consensus? I was like, you're joking. And then I instantly became sad because I had spent like my entire life conditioned to think that anything that was Māori was nothing but misallegiance. And actually, we were growing up encouraged not to learn our culture because that was taken away from my mum's generation and her generation above her. There's a lot of trauma sitting there, and so all our families wanted for us, my generation, was to learn the tools of the Pākehā world, that's what we call it, the Western world, so that we can thrive, which meant that we weren't given the opportunity to learn our language and learn about our culture. So yeah, that hurt, because I'm like, here I am learning all these American models and Western models of what facilitation is, yet I live and breathe facilitation. I've grown up with this. My ancestors were expert facilitators, and I didn't know until now. And there was one other Māori participant on a course of 12 participants. She was also having the same kind of visceral experience that I was having. And yeah, the 3-day course was actually really emotional because that set the scene, and it's almost like it opened our eyes to what we weren't aware of. And then it made us aware of just how almost brainwashed we were into thinking that nothing that we do is actually of substance. And we're almost seeking validation from Western world, or, to upskill so we can be the best. But yet here we are with these tools that are within us. And our ancestors were expert facilitators. Like, if you look at the process and break it down, you're like, oh my goodness, like that is facilitation 101. And I remember during that course, like, it got too much, and I told one of the tutors, I was like, I actually don't think I'm born to be a facilitator. And she goes, don't be silly. I don't think your ancestors have given you a choice. And I was like, oh. And I kid you not, the week after, I randomly looked at Papers Past. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's this database that captures all of the old newspaper transcripts.
Mm-hmm.
And I searched my namesake, who's 5 generations above me, and I found that she was a well-known Māori facilitator, and she used to facilitate gatherings for all the that where all the Māori dignitaries from across the country will come and talk about the challenges that Māori are facing, to
Mm.
celebrate how to be Māori, and to come up with actions and strategies on how to overcome the challenges. And the event was 5 days, and they named it Te Rā or Katerina. And I was like, the trainer was not wrong. I don't think my ancestors gave me a choice. And it was from that moment I said, I'm a facilitator, I'm a Māori facilitator, and I'm never going to allow anyone to deny me from standing in my Māoritanga as a facilitator. And I will stand in any space as a Māori facilitator from start to finish. And I'll bring in other techniques to enhance that rather than the other way around. Because what it looked like before was I might start with a Māori prayer or a Māori proverb, and then the rest of it would be Simon Sinek, Brene Brown. Now I'm like, I'm gonna learn what Māori facilitation was, and I'm gonna stand in that and be proud to be that, and then use the tools to enhance myself as a Māori facilitator. So that's long
Wow.
story short. That's when I claimed my role as a facilitator and as a Māori facilitator.
Beautiful. Thank you for taking the time to really share that experience and path. Um, and now I would be curious to unpack a few of these things because there's so much. Um, and one thing that comes up for me is the notion of emergence, because I think if you start with such a ritual to unpack all the challenges, um, there are two things that come to my mind. A, you don't know how long this will take, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and second, once you agree to that, so once you have alignment on the purpose, and then what? Is it then that you have another specific structure, or how do you go from there, from the Maori perspective, or maybe as opposed to the Western perspective? Um,
What's really interesting is because there is that fear, and the reason why uh, facilitators feel afraid of embracing pohiri is because it can take a long time. But I've noticed that when you allow people the time to bring them full selves into a space and to fully connect with each other and with the topic at hand, I've never come to a point or experienced it where it's blowing up. Like it just somehow naturally the group find their own ways to facilitate and navigate the conversations, and then we come to a close, which naturally ends up fitting in with time. I don't know how. And that's what I found surprising, because a lot of it was me letting go of everything that I knew to be true about facilitation and trusting in the process,
mhm.
because my ancestors have been doing it for centuries and it's worked.
So what is the
And
one thing? Sorry, I would
there
be
you go.
curious. Did you have to unlearn then? So what is it that you had to let go?
Agendas, structures, timeframes, outcomes. I had to let that go.
Wow.
And um, facilitation from a Māori lens, and I've experienced some other Indigenous cultures, and I feel like there's a lot of similarities where facilitating energies.
Hmm.
And there's one we've sorry, we've recently launched our first Māori facilitation training, which I can talk to you about. It just happened a couple of months ago. But we did a bit of research, and one name that we have found for a facilitator, a Māori facilitator, is tangata Māori. Tangata means person, and Māori is energy.
Mm-hmm.
And the name represents a person that is facilitating the energies of people and trusting that the individuals have the potential and wisdom inside to navigate the challenges themselves. And our role as a facilitator is guiding the conversation and the energy and ensuring that that flows.
And when you say
And
energy, what do you mean by that? Is it our emotions and how they impact our behavior? Is it our forcefulness or smoothness, how we interact? Or is it something spiritual?
I think it's a mixture of all.
Okay.
um, so you know how I said when we touch noses and we're exchanging modi and energy through a hongi?
Hmm.
That's the kind of energy that I'm talking about. And you know, when you walk into the room and you can automatically sense a vibe,
Hmm.
you can
Yeah.
sense if people are low or you can sense if there's energy in the room. Like you
Hmm.
can, it's kind of like the vibe.
Whether there's, yeah, whether they're enemies or friends, whether it's easy or there's some tension.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
That's what we're facilitating, and we're also facilitating the ancestors that everyone is bringing, you know, and we're we're facilitating real life, I guess, conversations and events. And
And
if
I,
you have a run sheet and you can't, it will just get in the way of that.
mm, and I would love to share when I think of you bringing the ancestors into the room. Um, I think at first it might sound, oh, it's getting really crowded, right? Um, and then immediately I'm thinking of how I put them in air quotes Westerners, right?
Yeah.
Us white people. Um, how we are bringing our ancestors into the room unconsciously because of all of our baggage. And I recorded an episode about our inner child, and it's the inner children who are guiding the board, leading the boardrooms,
Mm,
and all of our small t traumas and all of our um, childhood things that then get us to be triggered and get nervous and angry and upset and take things personally. But all of that happens unconsciously.
mm,
And so all of this was going through my mind when I'm thinking of bringing the ancestors in, because again, it's like making the implicit explicit. We are all
mm-hmm,
standing on the shoulders of these giants, and this might mean wisdom and it might mean trauma.
mm-hmm.
And whether we want it or not, we're bringing this into the space.
And if we're not opening up space to have honest conversations, then it's almost like we're putting band-aids over a wound.
Yeah.
And so a lot of my work is facilitating relationships between Māori and settlers. And these are fifth generation settlers. And because of colonization and that history that we have here in New Zealand, the tensions are high.
Mm.
And the way that I replicate a Māori way of facilitating when I'm working in those spaces is we start with connection. And I know if I get the connection right and I spend the good part of the morning doing this well, I know if I get that right, then the rest will follow and it will all come. I fully trust in that. And I bring in different techniques of how to do that. But firstly, it's creating a space where everyone can bring their full selves. And I might have a map where I get them to mark, where they are, we call it tūranga waiwai, and that means where you feel a special connection to the land.
Mm.
And then I will invite people to share their fondest memories or their significant landmarks and all of these things. And it's quite funny because the energy that I sense when I arrive in this room is okay, we are going to war, and I'm like, I'm fifth generation, and then the Māori will get up. I'm like been here for 1,000 years, and that's the energy that I can feel that people are bringing, and I know some of that tension before I enter the room. But when we start to give everyone an opportunity to share their connections, when we start to provide them a safe, well, not safe, brave space to share some of the traumas that they're holding. And these traumas come up in this space. It could be intergenerational, like your ancestor took our land and, we've been displaced and blah, blah, blah. And that could also come up for Māori versus Māori and neighbouring tribes.
Mm.
So all of these conversations come up, and then it's quite interesting because then it shifts and it's like, well, my grandfather had a fight with your grandfather, and I remember we used to play and think it was funny, and then next minute they'll be at the pub drinking, and laughing about it. And then all of these stories come up because we're forming connections and we're allowing people to bring their full selves to the space and bring up the trauma and some of the challenges in a brave way. And then we have what's called Māori, and it comes in the form of a physical object. And the purpose of that physical object is to hold the positive intentions and the energy that everyone brings so that we can move forward together as one. And it depends, so the example that I'm thinking of in particular, we brought along a native tree and it had a seed. And so all the energy that we bring into the space today as we plan the next 100 years is going into and nourishing this tree. And that tree is going to hold the Māori of this strategy that we bring together. So the energy that we bring is what our grandchild's grandchild is going to experience when they see this tree. And so it connects people towards that shared purpose, which is how I replicate or try to replicate the Māori way of facilitating. And so that's how I set up my workshops. Then once everyone's like, yeah, we're here, we're giving our positive intentions into our Māori, we're all feeling like we're on the same page, then I can help them create a strategy. I can help them do anything, whatever they've come to do, I can help them do. I can support them and guide them to do that because they've already formed those connections. And literally they do all the work themselves. Sometimes I'm just like, I feel like a fly on the wall sometimes because they are facilitating themselves, which in essence is what we are supposed to do, right? We're unlocking the potential. And so if I was there with a structured, rigid run sheet and I'm like, oh my gosh, like this conversation is going over. We've got to get on to the next activity and we've missed step 3 and we've got to go back to that. Otherwise, we're not going to get to the outcome. I would have missed all of that. And we would have literally been putting a Band-Aid over a wound and then it could erupt after, and we haven't got a solid foundation to work from.
Yeah.
And yeah.
And I thank you. I think it's beautiful to hear that also, how all these conflicts come up and that it's suddenly not only Maori against settlers, as you call them, right?
Mm.
But then also each subgroup amongst themselves, because um, and you spoke about the safe space or brave space, to speak about trauma, and I would be curious, what does it look like? Because to speak about such wounds can either, in a way that we feel the pain instead of accusing the other, takes a lot of self-awareness, emotional maturity. Um, are there some rules of engagement that you say, okay, we speak in I statements, we own our pain, we don't accuse the other? Or how does it happen in the space that they don't stand up and say, and it is your fault that?
Well, it's a conversation that we've been having in our in the Māori facilitation training that we've learned. That we've just launched. Because for us, emotion is healthy.
Mm-hmm.
It's displayed during that pōhiri process, and it's real theatrical. I'm not sure if you saw one of our Māori members in Parliament who tore the bill,
Mm-hmm.
and she did a haka, they did a haka,
In Parliament.
that in
Mm-hmm.
Parliament in response to the bill. My experience growing up attending Māori hui was a lot of emotion. It was a lot of laughing, yelling, screaming, crying, haka, songs, the works. And then afterwards, everyone is laughing. And, we're all getting along. It seems really dysfunctional. Um, but the more I start to understand the process of Māori facilitation, and it's all facilitated under the realm of Tūmataonga, who is seen as the god of war, the god of strategy, he was providing that protection for us, to that brave space for us to be able to bring that emotion. And so we're always trying to avoid it, or
Mm-hmm.
it's all awkward, but it's all sitting there and it ends up blowing up anyway if we keep suppressing it. And to know that we're guided by tūmataonga and we're not in it alone as facilitators is, I think, key for Māori facilitators. Secondly, we've been talking about the atua, or the gods that people are embodying. And so we've been doing a lot of research around the different Māori gods, the female gods that have been erased from our knowledge, and we talk about what gods are they embodying in this moment, and then how could we respond to that, and counter it. Because I've spoken about tūmataonga, but when the two parties agree that they're here to talk about that shared purpose, we then head into the meeting house, which is guarded under the watch of Rongo, Rongo Matane, and Rongo is the god of peace. And
Mm.
so there's all this like yin and yang kind of thing happening.
Yeah.
And then what we also have, a resource that we have is this is arotahi, and it's a Māori stone that's been gifted to me. And it's really heavy. It's a
Mm-hmm.
volcanic rock from a sacred mountain. And the purpose of arotahi is to hold the heavy energy that people are bringing into the space.
Mm-hmm.
So arotahi takes that heavy energy and holds it for us as we navigate the complex situations at hand. And the purpose of arotahi and how it's been carved is that the challenging energies flow in and then they flow out.
Mm.
And I bring this into spaces. And so if anyone has any trauma that they're holding, then one resource that we have is for them to hold arotahi. and to share that energy into arotahi, because that's arotahi's purpose is to hold that energy for us. Also, for me as a facilitator, if I've had a challenging experience or if I'm carrying challenging energies that have been shared by the group, I've got arotahi to hold that for me. And so we have another process which is called a pure, and that's a cleanse.
Mm-hmm.
And that helps us cleanse all that energy away. And that's through water, could be through sunlight, through wind. It's just beautiful because we know that we've got so many resources at our fingertips to help us navigate these challenging situations. And yeah, this is arotahi for me. And so these are the tools that we use to create those brave spaces. And then we also have what's called tikanga and kawa, and that's agreed ways of working together. And it could be ancestral rules of the house that we bring in. And that's how we navigate complex, challenging situations. And usually it's we respect the mana and the tapu of every person. So we're respecting the sacredness and the value that every person brings. And so we try to focus when we're having conversations, although not sometimes 9 times out of 10, it doesn't come out the way that we want. But yeah, that's when we're pulling on all these other resources that we have.
Mm.
Yeah.
And so what I hear is the permission to feel and to show our emotions, which makes so much sense because I think I've learned that it's true that what we cannot feel, we cannot heal.
Mm-hmm.
And in order to heal, we have to go through the pain. There's no shortcut to that. And then by holding it, it becomes explicit to the group. And from what I hear, they don't have to speak to it, but just holding the stone who will then do the work. So that people say, okay, something is in processing. So this person might be sensitive or fragile. And then it's also for the group to acknowledge that, maybe be a little patient.
And I've also seen people in private too just hold arotahi during an activity, during the breaks. Water's good as well. If the energy is really shifting, then we can take arotahi to the water just to a tap to release some of that energy. And honestly, like you just go back in and it's a shift. You can sense it immediately. It's quite powerful.
Yeah.
And this is, just one form of Māori. There's many other forms. But I did want to talk about how the top methods have actually helped me stand strong in my Māoritanga as a facilitator. Because what I've appreciated about the top methods is that it's a structured human dynamic process that has whakapapa, has history too. So that's something that we also respect as Indigenous. It's used worldwide as well. And the top methods have actually helped me navigate some really challenging situations. For example, one hui, or I don't know the English word for it, but one meeting I was facilitating, we had about 100 participants. It was a community meeting. We had warring Māori tribes who weren't seeing eye to eye. We had the farmers, we had fifth generation landowners, we had forestry, sand miners, business partners, shareholders, everyone was there. And the goal was to create 100-year environment strategy. So automatically you can see all these competing values. And I did all of my processes how everything that I shared, I was like, get the connection right, and everything else will follow, which it did. We ended up creating this beautiful 100-year vision, and a strategy for the future, which everyone was excited about. And then I stupidly asked for reflections on how people are feeling with what we've created, thinking that I'll get, I'm excited and da 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 da. And then I had one member from a Māori tribe get up and say, well, I'm actually not happy because um, I feel like we've been left out and the other tribe is getting more recognition in the strategy. And then so that tribe got up and responded and was like, I feel that there's a lack of education here. And if you were to actually acknowledge the history and if you knew, then you would know that we actually come under one. And then someone else responded to that. And I was like, oh my gosh, I I was freaking out at that stage, honestly, because I was still kind of new and finding my feet. But I had the ORID method. It's a top method. And part of that is surfacing. I could tell people were in that reflective stage.
Mm-hmm.
And so they needed to surface the feelings. And so I held that and I said, is there anything else anyone would like to share? And then a shepherd got up and he was like, I feel that we all shepherds are never prioritized. It's always about the shareholders, and we're the ones who are doing the day-to-day work, and no one cares about us. It's all about profit. We had sand mining people get up and people upset about the sand mining because we're going to have no land. We've got the sheep and beef getting up saying, this is how we're making money. We have forestry. Everyone started sharing their challenges, and here I was thinking that everyone was happy. And so the next stage of ORID is to say, so based on everything that's been shared, where to from here?
Mm-hmm.
Or how are we interpreting the information that's just been shared? And so then the group ended up facilitating, well, I think we need some further time together. We need to look at these issues, but we've got the strategy now that can hold us when we have those conversations. And now all of these issues have surfaced. We know what we're dealing with. And then I was able to close it with, okay, so what decision are we making? And the next decision was to finalize the strategy. They loved it. And there were further discussions that needed to be had. And the chairperson came up to me afterwards. She's like 80 years old. She's quite old. She's been the chairperson for 50 years. She said when she's never experienced a meeting where someone hasn't yelled and screamed and left crying. Mm. And that could have happened because that's the challenges that people were holding, but they've never been in a space where they could bravely say what they're truly feeling without someone getting offended or just someone there to hold a container for these conversations. And she was blown away. I was still sitting there quite traumatized like that.
What is happening?
I know, and I'm like, what would Pariba do in this situation? But I held it, and I had the top method there to hold me, and so there's value in both. There's value in all the methods that we bring as facilitators. Yeah. But yeah, I think for us as Indigenous, because we've lost all that knowledge, we have to just put everything to the side so that it allows us the space to explore what facilitation was from our lens. And then once we understand them, we can start bringing in the other tools. Yeah. But yeah, there's definitely value in all, and I try and bring everything in respectfully. As respectfully as I can.
Not looking at the Western tools and techniques that you might have learned, but to reintegrating them thoughtfully. And what I hear is also at their time. So what I hear is at the core of the Maori, facilitation is the beginning, right?
Mm,
The coming together and really honoring the slowness of the process
yeah.
so that later on these honest conversations can actually happen, um, using the different tools that would facilitate them and structure them.
Yes. And having the ability to facilitate and feel the energy and know what tool you need to bring in at the
Mm,
right time.
yeah.
And when I was having all these realizations, and namely about, oh my gosh, like I think the agendas, I actually got told off by a Māori facilitator for having an agenda because I got to the point where I was writing down verbatim of what I was going to say and the questions and how I would respond. So I was walking into workshops with 10-page agendas or run sheets. And whilst I was having all these epiphanies and moments, of unlearning, relearning, and like this is too much. Thomas Lantala,
Yeah, Lantala, he has been on the show. Yeah.
he's been such a breath of fresh air for me because it's almost like when I was having these realizations as a facilitator, I would wake up and look on LinkedIn and he's sharing his LinkedIn posts that will validate what I'm feeling. So one of them was, how he has a whiteboard post and it has a quote on it. I think one of it was around having no agendas.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And he pretty much everything that I was experiencing and feeling, he validated it with that post. So I was like, all right, I'm ditching the agenda and I'm going to trust my intuition. And it's funny because there's been quite a few times that's happened where he's just kind of given me the validation that I need to trust my instinct.
Mm. Yeah. So for those who don't know, Thomas, he's rather on the provoc provocative side of Western facilitation and very much inspired, I think, by Indigenous. Um, I think he spent some time in Australia with the Aborigines and learned from
It's,
them.
yeah, his first book was incredible. Where he was facilitating crises, like really
Mm,
big human crises. And the next book as well is really challenging ourselves as facilitators, which I love. But I thought it's interesting how he's been labeled as provocative because one of the challenges that I face as a facilitator is not the spaces that I hold, it's actually the sector.
mhm,
And if our way of doing things or our ideologies and all of that is not fitting in with what is known to be true in the facilitator world.
yeah.
It's almost like you feel like that provocative one, like
And then
oh
feeling misunderstood, put in
yeah,
a corner.
yeah,
Because it's not for the sake of provocation that you, if I understand you correctly, it's not for the sake of provocation, but it's for the sake of bringing forth the truth of the group without making assumptions.
mm-hmm. And it
And
means that you feel like a minority.
mm,
As a facilitator, I will go to events and I won't see Indigenous people there. A lot of the methods and workshops are shared, they don't align with Indigenous people, namely the connection piece. I've spoken a lot about connection.
mm,
My introduction was introducing landmarks that represent me and my ancestors before we introduce ourselves. And so things like icebreakers, workshops that only give us 1 minute to introduce ourselves, two truths and a lie, all of these things don't allow us to connect. But it's almost like that has become a normalized part of facilitation because our agendas are so jam-packed with activities to reach this outcome by 3 p.m. because everyone's got to go home and rush to work. You know, you're that just does everything that I shared, right? About how
Mm.
the space that we need as Indigenous, but it's not just Indigenous. Like I work with so many groups and they all need that too. They've just not given the opportunity to. And so I'm in these spaces and when I ask curious questions that's seen as a challenge, I feel like I don't fit in, which is okay with me actually, but I would probably be seen as provocative,
Mm-hmm.
similar to Thomas. And that's quite interesting because to me, it's not provocative, it's how we should be facilitating.
And then, yeah, and then it depends on how you look at the term provocative, because thought provoking is something very positive.
Yeah, yeah, it is how you look at it, right?
And provoke, it's kind of, yeah, maybe a little bit forceful, but
mm,
also in a positive sense, so that conversations can emerge around something. Um, and I would be curious when you train facilitation from a Maori perspective, and you have, I assume that you would have non-Maori, so non-Indigenous people in the trainings as well.
no.
Mm.
So the idea was sparked when I had that realization that we were facilitators. And when I had that realization, I'm like, we really need to have training so that we can stand in our mana, which is our pride, I guess,
Mhm.
as Māori facilitators. Um, but as I said, the training was technology of participation. There's structured modules to the delivery. Um, and the training that they were providing was adding in, a
Mhm.
Māori perspective here and there to enhance the top training rather than the other way around. And when I asked the trainers, is there a possibility that we can actually have a Māori training where the foundation is Māori, but we're bringing in top methods to enhance that? We started to explore that journey, but that's where the tensions started to arise between Western facilitation methods and Māori facilitation methods. And it actually took us probably about a good 2 to 3 years to get to a decision.
Wow.
And we hadn't really came to a decision where we agreed, but we came to a point where we agreed to disagree. But the Māori trainer that was part of the group wasn't happy with what we had come up with because her fear was that we are just translating Western methods into Māori methods without which prevents us from truly exploring what facilitation from a Māori lens was.
Mm.
And I didn't understand what she meant until I had my experience facilitating at an Indigenous conference.
Mhm.
And just to cut a long story short, um, we were invited to facilitate at an Indigenous conference. We weren't from that land. And so a red flag is there at that moment because facilitating at an Indigenous conference, the first people that you should be engaging with are the Indigenous people of that land.
Mhm.
And because we're all Indigenous doesn't mean we fit into the same box.
Yeah.
And so, unfortunately, we didn't have those relationships. So they were only brought in for the welcomings and the closings and the performances, which is how we're treated in New Zealand.
Mm.
We
Just
never
the
acknowledged
performance.
we never acknowledged at a leadership level. And so coming over there with our way of facilitating in our language, we're also diminishing the language trauma that they're experiencing, the loss of language trauma that they're experiencing, and they're hearing our language as we facilitate on their lands.
Mm.
The methods aren't aligning with them because we are using Western methods that aren't preventing the Indigenous way of talking, and there were outcomes that we needed to reach from the group, and it just felt like an extraction. And um, also, our knowledge wasn't respected as well in that space. So our wisdom wasn't incorporated into the workshop design because there was a specific format that we had to follow. And that's just really high level what happened. But I feel like I was supposed to experience that to understand what our the Māori trainer that was just averse to the program that we had put together, everything that she was trying to say, it's almost like I experienced
Mm.
that in another country.
So
And
basically, that you follow the same the Western structure, but you exchange the label and try to find the Maori equivalent. And then it's basically just again the band-aid or the appearance of it
mhm,
instead of the
mhm,
core philosophy that you would
yes,
change.
which is acknowledging the Indigenous people of the land and incorporating their perspective and knowledge at a leadership level,
Mm-hmm.
and their advice as well when you are facilitating in those spaces. And because that's taken away from us in Aotearoa New Zealand, I didn't realize it because it's something that's ingrained, it's something that's unconscious to us, it just happens. But when I was the person doing that to another Indigenous culture,
Mm.
and I got to experience what they were feeling, and I got to experience the hurt that they felt. And because when I talked about how when we facilitate it's at a spiritual level, like that really hit me spiritually. And it took me quite a while to recover from that experience. But essentially, I, I could see how the Western framework that we were using in that space didn't work. It didn't allow for conversation, it didn't allow for connection. It was extractive. We had outcomes. I if my Indigenous leadership was respected at the planning level, then I would have been able to express that and design something that was more that would create connection between us, and it was more respective of the people of that land and so forth. But we couldn't have that because we had this framework that we had to deliver
Mm.
and this method. And so when I had that experience and we had a, a meeting where we shared that, and we had a pure, the cleanse, and this is when I was gifted arotahi
Mm-hmm.
to hold their heavy energies.
Mm-hmm.
um, that's when we made a decision that we couldn't hold a Māori facilitation training that incorporated Western methods. We had to let go of everything that we knew
Mm-hmm.
so that we can bring forth the emerging
Mm-hmm.
emerging learning. And so and this actually relates back to getting rid of agendas and structures, because we got rid of all the agendas and all the structures. We had no playbook we were running from. um, what the way that we structured the program design was we had time slots, we had topics that we would explore, and that's all we used.
Wow.
And we relied on the signs from our ancestors and the wisdom that the participants would bring. And so in that instance, we had to change the group. It had to be Māori who were facilitators and who held that knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
And we changed it from a training to a co-design space where we were going to explore what facilitation is from a Māori lens, pulling the knowledge that we held. And then once we have that exploratory phase, we could then make a decision, is this a training that we can actually provide? And so I think everything is supposed to happen for a reason. So the challenges, which were hard at the time, I was supposed to have them because we would have pushed ahead with merging the two together. And after we delivered the Māori training, there was no space for any Western method. It was just fascinating. I just met with the group today to have a debrief, and just the learnings that have come from it is mind-blowing. But one of my key learnings from that experience was to trust it. And I don't even know what we're trusting in, to be honest, but it's to trust that we've got this, you know. And we didn't have a program, a design. We just had the topics that we were going to explore, and everyone brought the wisdom, and we were able to make sense of it, and that was quite fascinating. What was something I didn't anticipate was because we've got a generation now who have reclaimed our language. And because we had invited that caliber of Māori facilitators, the entire 3-day training, 90% of it was in Te Reo Māori.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And that's something that didn't even cross my mind, but when it happened, it was just beautiful. And so we were in an immersive Māori environment for 3 days, running this facilitation training that we had just put together without any agenda or, you know, structure. And the outcomes that have come from it is just mind-blowing, and it's just given us more to explore. So the plan is we are going to hold another training, and so that's a deep dive into the topics that we've explored. And then from that, we can pull together the learnings and design a program so that we can grow more facilitators. So a lot of what I've shared tonight is from the learnings, because a lot of this is unconscious knowledge for us. But when we actually conscientize it and we look at the roles that it plays in facilitation, then we are consciously embodying those practices into our facilitation style. And so I'm able to talk about it now because I'm consciously working on it. But before, I probably couldn't tell you what facilitation from a Māori lens was. All I had was pōhiri, but now I've got all these resources and tools and knowledge, and it's just quite, sometimes it feels surreal because, as I said, 5 years ago, I was saying, you know, I'm not built for this. And now here I am, and it's quite surreal.
Beautiful. And it's very inspiring to hear about your journey and what you can do by trusting the way and stepping into your own confidence and confidence in yourself and the wisdom of your ancestors. And I can see how you first need to understand it fully in its purity before then opening it up again. I think to really master a craft, you first want to master it in its purity, and then you can mix and match and see what fits and how it communicates with others. So that makes sense. And thank you for sharing the reasons behind that. Yeah. What remains your facilitation challenge now?
I think still I feel I'm quite challenged with the sector. I feel I think I'm challenged because um, firstly, the sector is dominated.
Can you remind us what the sector is?
And so when I talk about the sector, I'm talking about the facilitation sector.
Mhm,
It's not diverse and it's not representative of Indigenous people
mhm, mhm,
or Indigenous methods. And I find that quite challenging because facilitators hold pivotal roles and they play a huge part in supporting groups to navigate some complex challenges. And when you're working with communities and when you're working with Indigenous people, being able to have that connection or having that cultural intelligence and awareness is so important because you're not going to draw out the wisdom from Indigenous people if you haven't got that understanding, awareness, and or ability to form those connections. And which is why we always feel uncomfortable when we're in spaces because when you're a minority, that's how you feel. But when you're experiencing a process where you're not connecting or aligning, similar to how I was sharing about how I felt facilitating methods that just sometimes I don't even know what the words meant, you know?
mhm,
That's my worry and concern. And my worry and concern as well is that I don't feel like the sector, the facilitators in the sector are ready to be open to hearing this knowledge, to see it as a challenge.
mm.
Um,
Challenge as a critique or a competition?
yeah, I think but a bit of both. And it's almost like challenging their way of thinking
Mm,
or their way of doing. Um, yeah, I find that quite interesting and challenging because it just means I feel like I'm in my own little bubble now.
mhm.
um, yeah, because it's sometimes it's hard to explain. Um, yeah, and because as facilitators, you're also looking for others to draw inspiration from or to share learnings and knowledge. And I'm struggling to find um, similar facilitators in a similar boat where we can share Indigenous wisdom and knowledge.
Mhm.
You know, and there's so much value in that. Yeah, so that I guess that would be
And
what's challenging for
you
me.
mean then from other countries potentially?
Yeah.
Indigenous from Australia, from Africa,
mm-hmm.
from
Mm-hmm.
South America,
Yeah.
North America. Yeah.
I that's the beauty of LinkedIn, have formed connections like with facilitators like Manal. Um, it's it feels like a breath of fresh air when you, Thomas, you know, just posts like that challenge. Well, it's not challenging, it's just showing that alternative perspective that is not fitting within what we know to be true.
Hmm. Yeah.
That's what I'm craving and seeking.
And as a next step, maybe connecting to other Indigenous facilitators, because Thomas and Manal are also from basically the Western world, right?
Yeah, but I feel their perspectives just really align.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, with Indigenous
Mm.
ways of facilitating. Um, yeah, so uh, I I think it's challenging for me as well, just being on this journey of understanding colonization that impacts the loss of culture and language that I've had to experience from that, and a lot of hurt sits there. And I think once you are aware of colonization and institutional racism and unconscious bias, you can't unsee it.
Mm.
And for a lot of facilitators hold that. Um, and I would love for facilitators, especially who are working in Indigenous spaces, to utilize the Indigenous people at a leadership level rather than just for welcomes and performances, because that's the structure that we have in New Zealand now. We will invite Māori along to open and welcome, and then we'll get on with the business. That's what
Mm.
happened in Tahiti when I facilitated, and that's what I was doing to them.
Yeah.
It's not nice.
Mm.
Um, but you wouldn't understand that's uh, um, not the right way of doing it when you don't have that awareness.
Yeah.
Mm.
And then how to embrace the co-creation process, because it's about power structures, it's about insecurities.
Yes.
Um, and after our exploration call, I went into a self-reflection period, because you asked me the question, have you had other Indigenous facilitators on the show? And I think I mentioned that to you, like, oh, I might have been afraid of not knowing enough, asking the wrong questions and all of that, being insecure. And I wonder whether this is also in the way of many other facilitators or organizers, that if we then start to co-create, what are the traps? What are the misunderstandings? What are all of that? And it's then a shame if our insecurities and our ignorance, for lack of a better word, is preventing that instead of helping us to be a little bit more curious.
Mm. And this might be a really bad analogy, but it's almost like what it feels like is attending a women's rights movement that's led by males. They design the program, the content, the way it's working. They've got all the systems and structures in place and the presentations to support women who are, fighting for their rights, and not valuing them at a leadership level to give their perspective of what they know to be right for women, or how what the experience that they know women would need to have in that
Mm.
space. That's how we feel. Because we're never, because our methods aren't in a book, and they're not promoted by Simon Sinek. They're not, and I love Simon Sinek. I use him because I've done the Golden Circle so many times. I've facilitated that activity. um, I lost my train of thought now.
Because it's in
Um,
no book, it's not
yeah,
recorded.
it's not recorded. Our methods are seen to be nothing but myths and legends. I feel like that's why we're not really given the time of day.
Mm.
And that fear of not having structure, that fear of like, oh, what happens if it goes over time? Like, what happens if we don't have those outcomes? But actually, we need to get rid of outcomes.
And yes, and I think the being afraid of losing structure and clarity and certainty is also a trauma response.
Mm.
So I think,
Because it's a loss of power and control too.
yeah, and I think, and that's where the difficulty then is, right? So how can we co-create something that works for both sides if we want to collaborate? Um,
Mm.
because we cannot cancel out one trauma with the other, and there is no competition in trauma, right? It's
Because
and
this experience that I had at a conference, there was about 100 participants. Um, we had a trainer sharing an activity that they do to help groups form connections. And it was a cool icebreaker game um, where you have images on cards and you connect with someone who has a different image and you try and find the similarities and so forth. And then once you do, you find another person and it's quite fun. It builds energy and connection. But I found it interesting when the trainer shared that the purpose behind that game is to support people to connect at a surface level because it takes away that need to form connections at the deep level.
mm,
And that fear of doing that as well, which I understand because, you know, in a Māori process,
it's the
one of
opposite.
the feelings, yeah, it's like fear and nervousness and getting it wrong and all of that stuff is what you experience. Um, and so I just asked the question. I was just like, I'm curious to understand what is wrong about connecting, you know, at that deep level because that's one of the most integral concepts for Māori, and I'm assuming other Indigenous cultures as well. They need that connection, and I try to ask it respectfully and in a curious way, and it was taken as an attack.
Mm,
And the response was, "I'll have you know that people from Japan they don't like connecting, and people from this culture they don't like connecting either." And then so I'm like, "Well, you're in New Zealand, you're
yeah.
in Aotearoa, New Zealand." And I didn't ask this in an offensive way. I'm just really curious
Mm,
because one of the integral parts of what's most important beyond anything for Māori is connection.
mm, yeah.
When I did that activity, when I understood what facilitation was, she got me to draw out my number one value, and that was forming connections with people. That's an integral part of our culture. If we don't have those connections, we can't move forward. And so it's almost like that was stripped away from me in that
Mm,
moment. And I'm like, are you ready to hear another perspective?
yeah.
Or is your way the right way? And that's what I find really challenging
Yeah.
because I'm like, I don't want to be in these spaces anymore.
Mm,
I feel like yeah, just not respectful of, and it concerns me because you know then they're like we're facilitators.
yeah. And what I hear is the cultural awareness that you mentioned, because
Mm,
I don't believe that there's a the right way of facilitation.
mm,
There's not the one form, but there's a cultural aware, trauma informed, inclusive, human centered way of facilitation. Um, yeah, putting the people first and connection over content. Um,
yes, I've
right?
seen that a lot lately.
Yeah,
Connection over content.
yeah. Wow. And I think we could go on and on and on. Thank you so much for giving us a glimpse into your world of facilitation and
Thank you so
experiences,
much.
um, and really taking away a lot of wisdom and yeah, other perspectives, and also looking, yeah. at my own blind spots. What is driving this? Oh, I have to do it this way.
Thank you. Um, yeah, I just again felt really humbled to be asked to be on here, and actually I did try to push back.
You did.
um, um, but I, yeah, I hope I've my my positive intention is to not be disrespectful or to not say one way, my way is the highway. That's not my intention. Um, but to share the value
Yeah.
in it and the value of the potential there is if we were to be able to bring that wisdom to the fore. And just imagine if we were able to help other cultures to bring that out if they've experienced that loss, that could be quite powerful, especially because I truly believe that the answers to the problems are sitting within the communities, not at a government level, not, at a national level. The answers are within our communities. And if we as facilitators are able to support groups to unlock that potential and to unite and to come together, that's where I feel like we are able to see change. And I think, which is why I'm really passionate about community and about unlocking that wisdom
Yeah.
within. And I feel we can do that with Indigenous methods.
Mm.
and all methods.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much, Katerina.
Thank you.